Hey there, everyone, and welcome to Open Door Philosophy, fresh from the grave. I'm Derek Parsons.
Busy haunting old mansions. I'm Andrew, the ghost.
And thinking David Chalmers was onto something with philosophical zombies. I'm Taylor Jones.
And welcome to episode 68, where, in honor of Halloween, since this is dropping on Halloween, this episode we thought we would talk about spooky philosophers. But before we get to that,
That's
how
fun.
you guys doing? That is fun, right?
So
Right.
fun.
So fun.
It's funny because I think this is the first year we're doing this, right? Anything Halloween-y. And we usually kind of capitalize off of holidays, but the past holidays we've done have been like not Easter or, Christmas or Thanksgiving. It's been philosophers' birthdays, right?
Yeah.
That's true. That's true. I'm trying to think of philosophy episode of based around the Easter Bunny, but anyway, hey, Andrew, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Can you see the facial hair?
Look at that.
I don't usually
Yeah.
let it grow, and I am disgusted with myself, and it's completely out of my own laziness. So I've just been relaxing. I have the week off not the week off, but I had a basically half day on Friday and day off on Monday, so I've just been relaxing. How about y'all?
That's
Very
great.
nice.
Yeah. And Astros are doing well, so that's exciting. Rice lost, but UT and A&M also lost, so it makes up for it.
Ah,
Yeah.
indeed.
And
they
I think the
did.
Astros will probably win, or the Texans will probably win.
Well, this is 3 weeks. No, this is 4 weeks. This is 4 weeks before this airs. So anyway, in case anyone doesn't know at this point, OU beat UT, and that is glorious. Anyway,
That's great.
Yeah.
I have a question though. I've been watching this David Beckham documentary. Have y'all heard about this?
no.
On Netflix? I think it's new, and it's horrifying to see how badly English soccer fans treat their star players. So,
Yeah.
it's awful.
English soccer football fans are they
Soccer,
have a certain vibe.
yeah.
Yeah, not all of them, of course. All of them, of course. They're, yeah.
No, it's really. I think you'd like it. It's good. It's fine.
I'm more of a Welcome to Wrexham kind of guy.
I haven't seen it. Is that good?
It's fun.
I'm not going to support Ryan Reynolds.
Why? What's your problem with Ryan Reynolds?
I heard he's going to sponsor us. What are you talking about?
I'm against small media phone companies. I don't like Mint Mobile.
I mean,
I like monopolies.
monopolies.
Anyway, how are y'all? Yeah, Taylor.
Oh, I'm so good. This week, I have a short week. That's what I'm telling myself. I have Friday off of school. So I'm going home on Thursday afternoon at 2:00 because one of my classes is canceled. So
Nice.
I'll be looking forward to
Nice.
that all week. Baylor lost yesterday to Texas Tech. Very embarrassing.
Ooh, that's
Yeah.
Yeah, especially after we had our biggest comeback in school history last week. But, all in good fun. UT also lost. So, we can celebrate a victory somehow.
there's some wins.
Yeah, some wins.
Have some real schadenfreude when UT loses. Apologies to all Longhorn fans. Peace and love, my friends. Taylor, has Baylor won a game yet this year? Yeah, I say that like as nice.
They won at least one.
With
right?
as
We
much
won
love and
2.
compassion.
They won 2.
They've
We
won
won
2. Oh,
We won
okay,
against
okay.
Long Island.
Long
That
Island.
family weekend. Yeah,
Yeah.
because it got rained out. We probably still would have won. And then we beat UCF? UFC?
Oh, UCF.
Central
Yeah,
Florida?
UCF. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
By like 1 point last week. It was crazy.
Hey. Oh, I remember that game.
Yeah, we
Wow.
scored like 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter.
No, that was a crazy win. It was a crazy win. Welcome to our sports podcast, everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Andrew, yes?
By the time this is out, we'll have 1989 Taylor's version.
Yes. We
And
will.
the Eras Tour movie comes out on Friday.
On Friday. I know.
On Friday.
Andrew, do you have your tickets?
Friday.
Yeah, Friday 13th.
Only-
It's your lucky number.
Let me see.
Maybe
when this
that can
movie
be
comes
our
out.
that can be our field trip.
Maybe
for
we
this
should,
weekend.
maybe you and I should take Andrew to the Eras concert movie.
No,
That'd be so
absolutely not.
And then we'll go see Oppenheimer afterwards.
No. Well, I'd be down to watch Oppenheimer again. The only movie I'm interested in watching is the Napoleon release, which happens on November 22nd, 23 days after this is released. And I will go dressed in a costume.
Oh,
Is that over Thanksgiving break? Is that?
it might be worth the price of admission.
Yeah, I think so.
I would go. We can do a field trip.
I'm gonna be so happy.
Anyway, yeah. How am
Anyways,
I?
how are you, Parsons?
I'm wonderful. I am on fall break. It just began a whole week. Never in my educational career. It's a week.
Oh, it's a week.
This is the first time in my entire career that I've had a fall break, much less a full week off. It's kind of weird. I'll be honest. At this time of year, I'm just not used to it. But I'm just so glad. So anyway, and it's starting off wonderfully. The weather outside is glorious. We should be recording this outdoors. It is a day for kings and queens. Our kids were in town. We're coming through town, so we went and met them for brunch just earlier today. We sat outside on the patio seating. Oh my gosh, it was almost chilly in the shade. It's just so nice outside. Anyway, yes, so I am doing well. I have nothing to grade over the break. Well done by me.
Yay.
Yes, well orchestrated.
That's great.
By me. It's kind of by accident, but I'll take it. Yeah, I'm doing great. Got to hug my granddaughter this morning, so all's good. Yeah, nothing spooky about that.
That's wonderful.
Haha. That's called a segue.
So what's the plan for today?
You mean how are we going to do it, or what are we going to do?
No, just like what's the episode going to be about today?
Oh, we're talking about spooky philosophers.
So what's the idea behind this?
Well, it's Halloween, Andrew. I'm missing something clearly.
Get in the
not picking
spirit.
up on cues.
No, I'm just since we've never done this, I just want to know what's the game plan for today?
Well, the game plan is to talk about. Well, okay, so the three of us chose two philosophers each that we didn't really have any criteria per se. We're saying spooky. That can mean all kinds of things. This isn't one of mine. This person was a backup, but the philosopher Heraclitus died in a gruesome way. So that was going to be one of mine. He was devoured by a pack of dogs.
No way.
So he wasn't necessarily creepy himself, necessarily, that I know of. But anyway, the way he died was, a bit gruesome. So it's going to be really interesting to see what the three of us came up with. Because, we were like, hey, it's Halloween. Let's do an episode with spooky philosophers.
Yeah, okay. That sounds fun.
Well, who wants to go first? Am I going first? Oh, I switched off the camera for a second. I looked at notes. Did we do nose goes?
Andrew did.
I did nose goes.
Oh, well, then I guess I'm starting. Okay, I will start. All right, let's begin. Let's go way, way back in time to classical Greece. And my first spooky philosopher is Diogenes the Cynic. He was born, well, we're not really exactly sure when he was born, but he died in 323 BC, which means he was a contemporary of Plato. So, anyway, why do you guys think I chose Diogenes? Any clues?
Does it have to do with his cynicism?
Well, he was just a very eccentric fellow. Let's put it that way. You guys know much about Diogenes? This may be...
No.
Okay.
No, I don't.
Oh boy, this will be a real education. Okay, so Diogenes, this guy was the ultimate troll. He's great. Like, if you want to think about the person who's just the most, I don't know, always pointing out things that are wrong, in a sarcastic way. It's kind of like a social critic. Diogenes just called out everybody on everything. The wealthy people, especially wealthy people, he called out customs and traditions and things like that. But he also lived these things out. He just didn't shout it out on Greek social media or whatever. So, but now all that to say, I did think I don't want to misrepresent these philosophers when I'm talking about them. I chose the other one's Kierkegaard. Now, Diogenes he is a very interesting character. Let's put it that way. He is, however, really well respected amongst some of the other schools that developed around this time, especially Stoicism. He did have a huge emphasis on virtue and the pursuit of virtue, but especially simplicity and also authenticity. Like people following the pack just drove him nuts. He viewed like the world was just corrupted by materialism and hypocrisy. And so he just called this stuff out. So let me tell you the ways that he called this stuff out. All right. So this is how I think this is my best, attempt at making him spooky. He's definitely a bit off color. Okay. First of all, he slept in a large ceramic jar or barrel, depending on how you want to translate that, in the streets. He did not own a house. He just set up shop right there in the middle of the agora or the nearby. And he just lived his life in this barrel because he said possessions, materialism, all that stuff was empty. And so I'm going to live that out. And he was always dressed when he was dressed, he was always dressed in very tattered clothing. No doubt he smelled, I'm sure. His hair was matted. He was not an attractive figure, but that's what he was calling out. He's like, none of this stuff matters. That's all surface business. I can live in a jar, and as long as I'm living virtuously, then I'm fulfilling my duty as a human. So he really lived this out. He did a lot of other things. Now we get into the really weird stuff. He would, again, with customs, he would urinate in public. Often is reported that sometimes he would urinate on other people because he's like, this is just a natural function of the body. And he would also defecate in public. Apparently,
the other one he would do.
I'm getting to it. And apparently, he once defecated in the middle of a theater production. I'm loving Taylor's face right now. Oh, it's going to get worse. I'm going to say it. Here we go. He would also in public. Oh. Yeah, I did it.
Okay.
Because he's like, this is just a part of human nature. And now, how this guy, I don't know how he stayed in town. I don't know how the authorities didn't run him out of town. I don't know, some sort of decency laws or something. But his point was, hey, this is just natural. He did some other funny things. Now, a lot of these stories are really apocryphal. We're not entirely sure of their authenticity per se, but there's just a lot of them from various sources. Another one, I love this one. He would carry a lantern around during the daytime, claiming to be searching for one honest man, but could never find one. That's good prop comedy. Yeah. That's good prop comedy. Where did he get the lantern from? I can just see him walking around in his tattered clothing in the daylight with a lantern. Someone's he's just waiting for someone to come and be like, Diogenes, what are you doing? He had his response ready.
That's spooky.
I'm just looking for one honest man. Oh, it's something. I'm going to give you a few more.
There's more.
Plato. There's more. There's more. No, not. I've gone through the worst part. But he has some funny things, right? So the searching for one honest man's pretty funny, I think. Here's another one. In Plato's Academy, Plato attempted to characterize humanity using the definition of his teacher Socrates, where Socrates said humans were, in his words, featherless bipeds. So, on hearing the news, apparently Diogenes brought a plucked chicken to the Academy, announcing that he had found Plato's human. That's funny. That's funny.
Oh, gosh.
He brought a plucked chicken. Andrew, you're not even smiling. Yeah, am I not selling you on this?
No. I think he's funny.
Okay, a few more. Plato did refer to him as Socrates gone mad. But the last two stories I have to do with Alexander the Great. And the first one of these is pretty famous. Apparently, Alexander the Great came to town. I don't know about the validity of that, especially with the timelines. But anyway, apparently, Alexander the Great looked at this poor man sitting in a barrel in tatters and asked him if there was anything that he could do for him. And Diogenes responded by saying, yes, you could please step out of my sunlight. So there was that one. And
Wait, yes, but do you know the follow-up?
No, please tell me.
He says, if I was not Alexander, I would wish to be Diogenes.
Oh, that's great. I'm telling you, man, this guy was
Yeah.
witty. This guy was witty.
Yeah.
And the last one I had is another version of this story where he meets with Alex.
Well, wait.
Go ahead.
I still have there's the follow-up line to Alexander.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So if Alexander said, if I was not Alexander, I'd wish to be Diogenes. And then Diogenes said back to him, if I was not Diogenes, I'd still want to be Diogenes.
The burdens of leadership was weighing on Alexander. He's like, I just want to live in a barrel. I just want to live in a barrel. It looks so attractive. I can pee wherever I want. Wear whatever I want. Yeah, that's good. Thanks for the follow-up, Andrew. All right, this last one I got is another story with Alexander the Great. So apparently Diogenes is scrounging around in a trash pile, which included human bones. I don't know. Anyway, when Alexander asked what he was doing, Diogenes said, I am searching for the bones of your father, but cannot distinguish them from those of his slaves. Boom. Mic drop.
Yeah. That's pretty great.
It's the classic meme where it's like four skeletons. You're like, this person's white, this person's black, this person's Hispanic, and it's like where this person's a Christian, this person's an atheist, and underneath it all we're just skeletons. Ooh, which is very spooky.
So spooky.
Yeah. And do you know this story about what he wanted to do when he died with his skeleton?
No.
Or with his body?
I did not run into this.
He said, throw my body outside the city wall so all the creatures can feast on it.
Oh yeah. And that's good.
And then they asked, you don't care that you don't care that all these creatures are going to be eating me? And he says, well, as long as you give me a stick to fin them off with, I won't care. And then they say, well, how can you use the stick to fin them off? And he says, well, if I'm not able to figure out to fin them off, or if I'm not able to care, then why should I care about what happens to me when I die? Very spooky, right? Thinking a lot about bones.
Yeah. He was an intense dude. I like him a lot. Speaking of which, I've not read this book, but there is a recent book that came out, I want to say this year. It's called The Dangerous Life and Ideas of Diogenes the Cynic. And Taylor, I put in our show notes those names of the authors who are in French. Could you pronounce them, please?
Oh,
sure. My French is kind of rusty, but Jean.
That's better than mine.
Manuel Robineau, and Philippe Mitsis. That's my best go at it.
But yeah, there's Diogenes the Cynic. He is certainly a person of interest. He is always brought up when you're talking about classical Greek philosophers. So he's not just a guy who sits in the barrel and like pees on people. Apparently, he's a person of interest, and I think this book exemplifies that. And there is a famous painting. Is it by David of Heraclitus of Diogenes in a barrel?
Yeah, and there's also I have heard of that, but if you're not, in New York or France or whatever, there's also a very famous one in Houston. Well, it's not famous, but there's a depiction of him. Yeah, of Diogenes at the Museum of Fine Arts, Houston, where Alexander standing in the sun, and
what?
And
I've been there like 8 times.
Did we see that, Mr. Parsons?
Yeah,
I'm sure we saw it. Yeah, I'm sure. Huh. Well, that's cool. I'll look for it next time I'm there.
Yeah.
All right.
Someone pointed it out to me one time, and I was like, "Oh, wow, that's cool."
It is cool.
That is cool. All right, I got the painter. His name is...
Is it David?
No. Well, there's many paintings now, it turns out. Never mind. I'll do more research and get back to you. Oh, wait, here we go. It's French. No. Great. Jean-Léon Germain. I don't know.
Germain.
G-E. There's so many accents marks on this guy.
Germain.
That would just sound like, pretentious jerks. Not pronouncing, making fun of.
Wait, who is this?
Here, I'm putting in the show notes. Here it comes.
Jean-Léon Germain.
There it is. What do you think, Taylor?
Jean-Léon Germain. The M would be emphasized there because there's no accent over the E. The second E.
God, I'm so glad you're on this podcast. All right, excellent. Well, anyway, there's my first spooky philosopher, Diogenes the Cynic. Give it up for Diogenes.
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine
It's pretty
Yeah,
spooky.
the bones are great.
I like the bones.
And
How did they not like put him on trial? If they put Socrates on
this
trial,
guy's going at it with himself in
for
the
just
street.
like walking
and
around.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's a very
How is
interesting
that not
question.
more annoying than Socrates going and being like,
I think
hey,
people thought he was a
I'm sure
lunatic.
they thought he was a lunatic. How would you not think he's a lunatic?
Well,
yeah.
Do any of you know what cynic, the cynic Greek word, what that means?
I cannot recall off the top of my head.
Kynikos, I believe. I'm wondering if this is why they didn't throw him out. It means dog-like.
Oh, I thought Diogenes meant dog-like.
So
is it cynic that means dog-like?
I'm pretty sure it's cynic.
Okay.
Oh.
Kynikos. And so I'm wondering if they thought he was like a lunatic who just acted like a dog.
Yeah. Oh, they may have thought he was cool.
I don't know. That's
like,
curious.
Some Malaysians or Corinthians show up and they're like, "Hey guys, we got something to show you." It's like a little, instead of monuments and temples and stuff, they're like, "We got Diogenes." Spooky.
I'll give you a hint. Okay, this person, not their own work, but their work analyzed by a later philosopher, spurned the term or the study called hauntology. Hauntology.
Like haunting?
Hauntology.
Oh, with a T.
Or
Hauntology.
Hauntology. Well, hauntology.
Okay, hauntology. Okay, well, that's no good clue for me. Do you know, Taylor?
I do not know.
Yeah, I found this in my research. I did not know this, but the philosopher is Karl Marx, the most destructive philosopher of all time. The hauntology comes from another. I think he's a Frenchman. I'm pretty sure. Derrida. And Jacques Derrida, who I think its book is The Spectres of Marx, but I'm not sure. That's not my guy. Came up with this phrase. It's in reference to the first line of Karl Marx.
Okay.
Which is Communist Manifesto. Do y'all know this?
Some about the proletariat.
It's a specter is haunting Europe.
Yeah, it's a great opening line.
Spectre is haunting Europe, and that specter is, it's fantastic. It's a fantastic opening line. So that's one reason that I wanted to choose old Carl, because I think that's a cool opening line. And that specter, I think, is communism. I can't remember. I can't remember the rest of the line, which is kind of funny. Well, that was my first reason for choosing Marx. My second reason for choosing Marx is, have y'all ever seen a picture of him? Yeah. He's pretty spooky.
No.
Yeah.
You haven't seen a picture?
He's pretty spooky.
I
Taylor?
have.
I bet you look at the classic Marx
I'm
picture.
sure you have.
Like, oh yeah, that guy. Oh yeah, that guy.
Yeah, you should check him out.
Okay, let me Google.
He looks like Santa.
Oh, okay, yes. I have seen him.
Yeah, and I think his kids used to call him Saint Nick, or his grandkids, or his nephews and nieces, or someone, but because he had this long flowing beard, and yeah, he's super spooky, and he uses so many death and resurrection, but not good resurrection. He uses what's the one where it's like not the resurrection of living people, it's the resurrection of dead people.
Necromancy or something?
Yeah. Necromancy. Yeah, necromancy. He says that in the book Capital, which is the first volume. Well, there's 3 volumes. The first volume, I think it's in. He says capital money is necromancy that surrounds the products of labor. Okay, so he's very very akin to using specter, creepy analogies in his work. So I thought that was pretty cool. Karl Marx, he's most famous for being, I think, wrongly attributed to being a philosopher of economics, when he's really more of a sociologist who's looking at different class struggles, class divides. He's looking at class and the relationships between classes. But he does have a very interesting book called, it's a 3-volume series called Capital, which is a book that really goes,
like, it's massive.
It's huge. Even one book is huge. So he was working on that. It took him 10 years to write the first volume. I'm sorry if I'm getting these wrong. They might be in disorder, but it took him like 10 years to write the first volume, 30 years to write the second volume, and he finished the book. Or he didn't finish the book. The last one is put together by his contemporaries from notes that he had in other natures. And funnily enough, I mean, it's not that similar to our last Diogenes the Cynic, but his thesis was on a similar Greek philosopher, on Epicurus. His last one, his thesis was the difference between the Democritean and Epicurean philosophy of nature. So that's kind of funny, I think, that he's looking way back into Greek philosophy for some inspiration when he was studying. Maybe I'll be the next socialist philosopher or something, but unlikely. So what do y'all know about Marx just off the top of your head?
Well,
where have you heard him?
Gee, in my own personal experience, I have heard his name invoked by individuals who are critical of public education. But
that's funny.
Oh,
yeah,
that's funny.
It's a hoot. But outside of that, Marx, of course, is incredibly polarizing just because he's cited as the person who really is responsible for communism. And of course, that was played out in real time in the Russian Revolution. And it's all, as they say, history from there. But yeah, I used to teach Karl Marx. Well, I used to teach Communist Manifesto when I taught world history for obvious reasons, I think. And yeah, that's about all I know of him. I'm not sure I knew much about him, honestly, before I don't know, started studying history formally. Oh, how about you, Taylor?
We talked about him actually on Friday in one of my classes, my world cultures class. We're studying the kind of Enlightenment period in Europe. And we talked about him just generally and read like a couple excerpts about how he talks about religion as like the opium of the people, and that all history is just a class struggle, and that like the common people, the proletariat that produces something, should unite against the upper echelons of the society and government.
Like many great writers, his writing is provocative. It evokes a lot of emotion. It's well written. It's written to be like, zingers. Here's that opening line, Andrew. I pulled it up. A specter is haunting Europe, the specter of communism. All the powers of old Europe have entered into a holy alliance to exorcise this specter. So, just listen to that language. It's great.
Yeah, and I think the Communist Manifesto, it's a short book.
It is.
It's rather accessible. You can find it. I mean, it's so funny. It's so funny to me. I don't know why, but you can find all of these communist works in all of, not only the communist works like Capital and the Communist Manifesto online, because they're over 100 years old, regardless, etc. But also a lot of communist organizations put them online for free, which I always think is funny. But that one's pretty accessible, I think, but it doesn't really discuss.
It was meant to be accessible.
Yeah, it's meant to be a pamphlet for the common people. And he's not going in that book, which surprised me when I first was trying to go through it. It doesn't really go through his theory or really the philosophy behind class struggle and economics, his kind of outline of economic history, which he does in Capital, which is a much better work, but it's not very accessible. And I'll give you a resource in a minute if you're interested in going through that. But essentially what he's doing is he's looking at, like you said, Taylor, he's looking at the history of class struggle as brought upon by human struggle, and really the exploitation of labor. And that's through underpaid or unpaid work, essentially. And that's going to drive, a lot of class divide, especially. We should do an episode on this, but it's so complicated, so I'm not going to even try to go into this now. But I think that, well, I don't even want to go in and try to explain anything because we don't have enough time, and he's so controversial. But let me give you, I found 5 facts from this cool website called FEE Stories. I'll just give 5 fun facts about him because I think they're pretty cool. One of them I especially like. The first one is when he was a young guy in university studying, he was really into Hegel. who I was going to pick as another really freaky philosopher, just on the way he looks and
He's on the
some things
list.
he said. Yeah. He got in a lot of fights around his views on religion and politics and economics as a young guy. So he got drunk a lot in school, and he fought a lot of duels. So I thought that was pretty funny. Secondly, he basically never had a country after he left Prussia in 1842. No country would accept him. He moved to England when he was publishing.
Yeah.
And even, this is a fun fact for us, he was considering moving to Texas in 1843.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was, but that was the Republic of Texas back then. And he applied to, applied, I think, for citizenship there. I don't know what happened with that, but I thought that was cool.
Interesting.
He was super poor when he was dying, or when he was an old man, and his wife once pawned his own pants to buy foods.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, his wife, his wife said, or his mom said, or his wife said, if only Marx made money instead of just writing about it. So that was pretty funny. Fourth fun fact: a fellow communist once tried to kill him for not being radical enough. So I thought that was funny. And then last one, and this is kind of a sad fact, he died broke, and only 11 people attended his funeral.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so that's it for Marx.
I'll say, Marx is his own kind of ghost. He continues to
He's
haunt.
around.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
He's everywhere. And then when you throw the ism on the end of it, people throw that term around without even really knowing what it means. And if you do know what it means, then that's great. Throw it around all you want. But it's like some of the many words. Another one is fascist. People throw that word around and don't really know what fascism is. They think it's the same thing as communism, and I'm just like,
100%.
So anyway, Marx is misrepresented often. But I always talk about. I think he's a product of his time. He wrote Communist Manifesto, I think, in 1850. And we're right smack dab in the middle of the British Industrial Revolution.
Oh, yeah.
At that point, no labor laws have been passed. All the horrors you hear about the Industrial Revolution with 8-year-olds working in factories and 16-hour days and living in hovels and all this sort of stuff. Like, if it wasn't Marx, it would have been someone else.
Yeah,
and
he was like the Luther. He's like the Luther of capitalism. Let me say one thing. If you are interested in learning more about Marx, there's this guy who's a British philosopher, academic named David Harvey, I think. And he is like the preeminent Marx scholar in the world, or academic around Marx. And he has about 15 years, I'm not sure, but he has a lot of resources around reading Marx Capital. Like, he's the foremost scholar in the world. He has on his website called davidharvey.org courses that he has at his university, filming of him in a seminar reading Capital 1, Capital 2, Marx's Grundreis, and he has his own books on there for free and reading groups around them. And he has all the years that he's done these seminars online for free. So it's a really great resource. He's like the world's premier Marx scholar. So that's a really great resource.
He's the man.
Yeah.
All right, Taylor. Well, we're tossing the football your way. Time for your first spooky philosopher.
My first spooky philosopher is Spinoza. Do y'all know who he is?
Peripherally.
Okay. Do y'all have any guesses as to why I picked him? Yes.
I don't. I know he's Jewish. I know he wrote a lot about religion. He comes up in my religious studies every now and then.
Yeah, that's about as much as I know about him too.
I think he came from a Portuguese family, and he was writing in the very early Enlightenment. So he's born in the 1630s and then died just before 1680. So he was writing at kind of when the Enlightenment kicks off in Europe. And he was extremely, extremely, extremely radical. And he started writing when he was very young and was very well learned. But then he starts contesting against the church, like you see a lot of radical Enlightenment philosophers do. And he came after Descartes. And if you know about Descartes, he was fairly radical for at least that time with his ideas of mind-body dualism and the senses are unreliable. Mm-hmm. And then Spinoza comes and he's like, okay, Descartes went this far, but he didn't go far enough. So he takes all of Descartes' ideas and he's like, no, the senses are entirely unreliable, and has a lot of these very interesting and difficult to grasp metaphysical concepts about humanity, that like there's only one physical substance or one substance, and that's God, or like a divine figure. All humans are just modes of the divine, and breaks all of that down. But the way he writes, do y'all know this? How he writes?
I think you've told me.
I think.
Go ahead.
Yes. He writes in the style of a geometric proof.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. So if you remember from back in geometry, when you have your premise or your claim and then your evidence and how you support that, that's how he writes philosophy. So reading it alone and trying to decipher what he's saying is very spooky. It's a spooky endeavor. And he'll define his terms, and you have to like keep going back to the terms and trying to parse together what he means and just poring over it. But if you can think of how much Descartes seems to have upset things, Spinoza is like turning the heat on the fire, or like putting gasoline on the fire that was Europe in the Enlightenment period. And of course, the European governments hated him, absolutely hated him. The churches hated him because he's contesting the whole biblical premise of religion, saying that, like a lot of other radical philosophers, that there were no miracles because they defy the laws of nature.
Mm-hmm.
So Jesus didn't exist as a savior. He was just a man, and none of the miracles happened. They were all just people maybe twisting what had happened or using events for their own gain. And a lot of his work was banned almost immediately. Once it started circulating, it got banned and pulled off of shelves and not put into libraries. For a while, he was able to garner some following with academics, but he was ultimately, that kind of disbanded as people were either like imprisoned, or they passed away, or they encountered other philosophers or religious people that were able to change their perspective. But I think part of the reason I find him spooky is, one, because he's so difficult to understand, like notoriously difficult to read and to process. But he was also like this looming shadow in Europe that they kept trying to chip away at and to get away, and he just wouldn't stop. But then we kind of see how he impacts us today.
Yeah.
And you see kind of remnants of his philosophy and other people about, like, I don't know, taking away miracles and how divine things fit into the laws of nature.
Yeah, he had a real deistic conception of God, if I recall, which of course doing away with miracles fits in with that. Yeah. I always thought like, Spinoza, that's such a cool name. Like if I could like, go to philosophy parties and be like, oh, hey, let's talk about Spinoza. They'd be like, oh, I've only heard of him, but he has a cool name. Then I thought I'd be cool by default.
I think if you're going to philosophy parties, that's probably a ship long sailed.
Yeah, I don't know that I've ever been to a philosophy party. I wonder what that'd be like. Have you been to philosophy parties? Is that a thing? Philosophy parties? Oh,
no.
Andrew?
Maybe.
Yes?
They're academic conferences.
Oh, that's not a party. Does everyone go like to the bar afterwards and we're like, let's get metaphysical?
Oh yeah, that's a thing. That's a thing. Yeah. No, that was a thing that my one of my classes actually did that it was a once a week seminar, and then they would just go to the bar afterwards.
Yeah.
It was it was a pretty cool idea.
Huh.
Yeah, I think that's a thing. And then like all of the philosophy department, at least at Rice, would come together like every day after school and drink together, which is kind of sad.
Oh.
That's pretty sad, but I guess that's how they would, have fun. And so props to them.
All right. Well, Spinoza. Anything else on Spinoza?
I do think that he's interesting in that, in some ways, in his ethics, he tries to keep an element of human divinity and like a higher purpose or higher goal to humanity in a mechanistic worldview. And for as much as he disregards divinity of God or like a personal God, he still keeps some of that. And I think that's an interesting thing to notice, that you can throw off as much of the old ideas as you can, but some of it still lingers.
It's interesting. Do you know if he influenced Hegel? Either of you? Do you know if he influenced Hegel? It sounds like something that would influence Hegel.
He did. Hegel said something about him. He said, what did he say? I think he said something like, you either believe that Spinoza was correct or you're not a real philosopher. Something to that extent. Yeah. So that's pretty funny. And Einstein also said something about the way that I think Einstein believed that Spinoza's account of God was correct or something like that. He thought that
I can see that.
He believed in Spinoza's God. Yeah. So that's cool. Influential guy.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, very influential.
Oh, here's the quote. Do you want to hear it?
Yeah.
To be a follower of Spinoza is essential. You're either a Spinozaist or not a philosopher at all. There you go. It was quite accurate, Andrew. Good job.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Well, I guess that means it's my turn, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's on you.
So just like sidebar thing that I was thinking about while I was putting this together is oftentimes when we think of scary individuals and scary stories and stuff like that, they usually have a degree of mental illness of some variety. And I wanted to be really sensitive to that, like trying to come up with something kind of spooky, but also not something spooky as a result of someone's mental illness or neurodivergency or anything like that, right? So I say all this next stuff with my next philosopher with that in mind, and I chose Soren Kierkegaard. That's right, the originator of existentialism in Europe. I'm going to cast him as a lost lorn lover, right? So here we go. He haunted the streets of Copenhagen heartbroken over his fiancée or his former fiancée, Regina Olsen. So here's the story if you don't know. So Kierkegaard, he lived from 1813 to 1855. He died young. He was engaged to Regina Olsen in 1840. It lasted about a year. Now, Kierkegaard came from a bourgeois class. His parents or his family was involved in shipping, which was very lucrative at the time, especially in Copenhagen. So he had lots of money, but not nobility. A lot of his family died young. He was just kind of alone by the time he got to, his mid-30s. Everyone had died. But in those types of circles, engagements are really important, especially back then. And so he became engaged to a woman by the name of Regina Olsen. They were engaged for about a year. And then famously, and I mean, like, there's books and I don't know, there may even be movies about this. He broke his engagement with her, but remained romantically devoted to her for the rest of his life. So let me explain why that happened. Kierkegaard, he broke the engagement with her for a number of reasons that are kind of deduced by his letters and his books. His relationship with Regina is like indirectly mentioned in a number of his books, like Either Or is one of them. But also he wrote something like, I don't know, pages of journals that he left behind. He just wrote and wrote and wrote. And and letters too. People have letters from him. Anyway, here they are. One is that, of course, he thought this relationship would be a distraction from his intellectual and spiritual pursuits. He was an incredibly devout Christian. And that's actually one of the reasons he didn't feel that he could really be fully devoted to Regina, because his spiritual pursuits were so intense. He didn't know if he would be able to devote to her enough of himself that he thought would be satisfactory, but also his intellectual pursuits. Like I said, he just wrote and wrote and wrote. Another thing, he was definitely somewhat neurotic. He was depressive, very melancholic, and highly introspective. And so he had lots of doubts about his ability to fully commit to a lifelong relationship, and just constantly just worried over that. I think the term we use these days is thought spirals. Well, he was just one big spiral. Like an extension of that, Kierkegaard may have worried that his own struggles with mental and emotional health would negatively impact Regina's life. So he believed that ending the engagement was a way to protect her from these potential hardships. But he like really, and this is like, you know, the lost love business. Like he really cared for her happiness, which sounds ironic. And in trying to care for her happiness, she was so distraught at him breaking the engagement, he would write her these really cold letters so that she would feel like he just didn't like her. And so the breaking of this engagement just had to happen, and it was in her best interest when he loved her tremendously. He just didn't think he could commit. So that's kind of hard. But the other thing is, like, the city of Copenhagen at that time was very small. I mean, it was big for a city of that time, but it was closely knit, if that makes sense. City walls. It's a city built on water. It's there on the North Sea. Am I right? Up there in Europe. Everyone kind of knew everybody. And people from multiple classes like knew other people from multiple classes. Like it was a tight knit community. So breaking this engagement was not just some private matter between Kierkegaard and Regina Olsen and her family. Like it was considerable gossip throughout the city of Copenhagen. Lots of attention. Newspapers, would write about it. They would do little cartoons. It was a big deal to break an engagement in the 19th century, and especially one in a community as tight knit as that. They attended the same church, so they saw each other all the time. It was rough. But he never let go of his love for her.
That's so sad.
It is. So let me tell you some of these things. One, he took the engagement ring that had 5 diamonds in it, and he fashioned it into a new ring in the shape of a cross, and he wore that ring for the rest of his life. He continued to financially support Regina and her family after he broke the engagement. And she did eventually marry, and even after she married, their relationship continued. It was very cordial.
How silly.
And they kind of made up in a way, but it was very cordial. They would exchange letters occasionally, and he even tried to leave his estate to her. And I've read conflicting reports. That 2 sources said that she rejected his estate, and one said that her husband refused his estate. But Regina and her husband eventually moved. They came over to the New World, and I can't remember what island they went to, not Jamaica, but down there in the Caribbean. And she was 80 something when she died, 83, I think. So she lived like 4 decades after Kierkegaard had passed away. But anyway, it's a tragic love story. He just always pined for her. If you want to try to make it spooky, you can be like the obsessive lover. But anyway, if you're looking for some sources on that, there's a book called A Keeper of Love's Flame, Regina Olsen and Soren Kierkegaard by Morten Jensen. And then a more recent biography on Soren Kierkegaard. It's called Kierkegaard, Philosopher of the Heart by Claire Carlisle. So there you go. That's my bit on Kierkegaard.
Yeah, we can also direct people to our Kierkegaard episode, but I don't remember which one, which number that is.
I don't know. It was year 1, so it's in the teens. Teens.
We did also do an episode on Sickness Unto Death a couple months ago.
I don't know.
That one is a good work.
He's a pod favorite, I think.
There's a very he's an interesting person personally, and his philosophy is very emotional. And intense, so a lot of people find it compelling.
And he has a cool name.
He does have a cool name. He does have a cool name.
I'm so excited to share my last one with y'all. Have y'all ever heard of Nick Bostrom?
I've heard, and that's about it.
Okay, Nick Bostrom. If you look him up, for one, he looks really creepy. Sorry, Nick, if you're listening. Because he is still alive. He is he's a modern philosopher living right now. He's Swedish, I think, and he is very, very prominent in science fiction-y philosophy. And what I mean by that is avenues like artificial intelligence, kind of neuroscience, philosophy of neuroscience in terms of what's whole brain emulation, which is essentially taking our consciousness, uploading it to a computer, and also in AI threat or did I talk about that one? The threat of AI. I think that's what he's been focusing on recently. And then probably the most famous one is simulation theory. Okay. So he is the guy who influenced a lot of matrixy kind of thought. I think he's kind of going to be rising in philosophy over the next probably 15 years as we're dealing more with AI, because he was thinking about this stuff way before, maybe not way before, but I think before it was in the limelight. He was thinking about super intelligence and what would happen if a super intelligent computer existed, what that would look like, what are the ethics behind that, and how we should be responding to that. And so I think that's pretty cool. He also is thinking a lot about, well, I talked about it a little bit, but the ethics around AI. How should we create AI that is most ethical in the sense that it won't kill us if it if it ever comes to that level? And so he's been influencing a lot of, I don't know if they're celebrities, but they're kind of people in the limelight. They're technocrats, basically. Elon Musk, Bill Gates. So those are the two big ones who have been really influenced by his work. I know Elon Musk is really worried. He created this open AI thing in response to Google, like the Google's DeepMind, after he thought they weren't worried around the ethics behind it. And so I don't know if Elon Musk or Bill Gates have publicly mentioned Nick Bostrom, but there's no doubt in my mind that they've read him and have been influenced by him. But also there's been two philosophers who have spoken about him and his importance: Peter Singer and Derek Parfit. Derek Parfit's a philosopher of mind, I believe.
Yeah, covered him in class this week.
Yeah, and Stephen Hawking also talked about him as one of the most important modern philosophers. Their big thing is not that he's like some genius. It's just that he is offering something that philosophers aren't thinking about that's important. So I think that's why I picked him, because he's talking about scary things.
Our AI overlords.
Our AI overlords is one. Personally, what freaks me out is this mind uploading idea. Digital sentence is what he calls it. That freaks me out for some reason. But he's talked a lot about that. He also, well, I won't talk about that one, but that one's cool. I think one that is really interesting, and I think that is important, is called, what's it called? The Ethics of Human Enhancement. And so the idea behind that is like, how should we think about, well, enhancing ourselves with AI technology? There's companies right now whose job it is basically to implant chips in our brains, and it will help people who who are paralyzed. It might stimulate.
Oh, sure, or epilepsy or something like that.
Yep, exactly. Yep. So these are the ethical ways around it, but then there's some. It's kind of a slippery slope in his mind. He thinks that how much should we change humans if we are able to? There's some sense that we have an obligation to help people like this who want the help. But in one ways, how far should we go changing our own bodies? So kind of a cyberpunk kind of thoughts around that. But what I think is really freaky is that he thinks and he argues that it's extremely likely that we're living in a simulation. And this is his most famous paper. So just before I tell you all about it,
that's where I know him from.
Probably.
Students are all about this. They love the whole simulation argument.
Yep. This is actually probably got me interested in philosophy first, now that I think about it. I tried to read this paper 10 years ago or something, and I couldn't. But what do y'all think about simulations? Do you think it's likely?
No.
No.
I don't. But if it was, then I wouldn't really know any difference. So I just don't get too worried about it. Could it be a simulation? Sure. It depends on what you mean by simulation. Does it mean like we're in a Sims game or something? No, I don't believe anything like that.
Yeah, maybe not a game. So he lays out three premises that he thinks, one of which is very likely. The first is that humans are unable to reach a stage where they could create some kind of simulation that's as advanced, that could replicate our experiences inside of that simulation. Okay, does that make sense? For there? So that's one, that's very unlikely to happen. The second one is that humanity has a very little interest in running some kind of simulation where they could see their past or see humanity evolve or something to this extent. Okay. So humans either think it's morally wrong to do so, or they're just uninterested, but they have reached that stage of ability. Okay. And then the last one is that basically it's very likely that there is a simulation ongoing that we might be a part of, where our experiences that we're living in can be replicated into a computer, and that we might be living in something like this. So it's a little bit, I think he goes a little bit beyond it, and this is simplified, of course, but these are the three big planks to it. And so at least it's a fun argument. At least it's a little freaky and kind of messes with the mind. So I think it'll be interesting to see how he's remembered once he dies. He's like 50 years old right now, so he's quite young. But I think it's really interesting, at least, that he's thinking about AI and super intelligence and the ethics of changing our bodies and the ethics of uploading our minds and how possible that is. He's a physicist by training. What did he get his PhD in, actually? Did he get a PhD? No? He got his master's of science in computational neuroscience. So he's not necessarily a philosopher, but I think it is quite interesting. Oh, he does have a PhD in philosophy. But I think it's interesting that he's coming at philosophy in such a science fiction-y way. And it's at least important, I think.
Spooky. I think his paper, Are We in a Simulation, is where I know his name from.
Yep.
Which makes sense. It's the most famous paper.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's it. And he was also a stand-up comedian when he was in college.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Usually highly intelligent people are comedians. That's not a joke.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not a joke. But that was a joke.
Yeah.
Hey, let's get our last spooky one going. This one's probably no surprise to anyone. Maybe best for last. Taylor?
Ooh, no pressure. So my last philosopher that we're going to talk about is none other than Friedrich Nietzsche, which I'm sure that many of you have heard of Nietzsche. I think we've talked about him on the podcast before.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. He was a German philosopher writing just after Kierkegaard. So at the turn of the 19th century, no, 20th century. He was writing, and he was trained actually as a classical philologist, which I believe is like linguistics. So that's kind of how he comes at a lot of his works. And he was an incredibly smart person. He finished his studies very early. He got his PhD in his early 20s and started working as a professor. Like, I think he was like, what, before 25?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
He was employed full-time as a professor, and he worked, and he was a very prolific writer. He wrote in many different styles like prose, and he critiqued other writers, especially Plato and a lot of the very early classic philosophers he wrote about. But he's also famous for lines such as "God is dead and we have killed him." He wrote about other contemporary philosophers like Schopenhauer. He was very influenced by Schopenhauer and wrote an entire essay on Schopenhauer as educator, where he writes that the world as we experience it in society influence us to not become our true selves, because we get caught up as cogs in a wheel and we just fulfill our role rather than crafting our own identity, and that it is our responsibility as humans to pursue things that will cultivate our soul rather than just being cogs in machine and just going about our business. Which he does have some very powerful or encouraging ideas, but he's also, I don't know, a lot of people find him not, I don't know how to say this in a nice way. He's very polarizing, especially among philosophy students today. There's a lot of mixed opinions on his writings because he is often highly critical. Like in Twilight of Idols, he criticizes Plato for his values and for not having a moral system, and he praises Thucydides and has all of these very complex writings. And just, I find him a little bit spooky. He kind of looks like a spooky guy with his gigantic mustache, if y'all have seen.
He wins the award for like philosopher mustaches.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. For sure. No doubt. No doubt about that.
Yeah, things like a push broom.
Yeah. Much like Kierkegaard, he died young. The last 10 years of his life, he was mentally kind of incapacitated. He was in very poor health and wasn't able to work. He had to stop working when he got really sick, and he passed away. And then a lot of his works were published posthumously by his sister. And that's how we have a lot of the works that he wrote, things that he may not have intended to publish, but we have now.
Yeah, The Will to Power is that one. And it's a lot of disagreement in scholarship community about whether or not that should have ever been published. But anyway.
Because it was taken over by his brother, right? His brother or his
sister.
His brother-in-law. Yeah. His brother-in-law was a member of the Nazi party. And,
his Nazi brother-in-law. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it gets somewhat associated with Hitler.
And it screws him over, which is
45 years later. Yeah, he really gets a bad rap. You know what I do think is interesting? We've brought up three people. 3 of the 6 have been very provocative. Diogenes, Marx, and now Nietzsche. Those were all provocateurs. I mean, you read their work and it's in your face.
Yeah.
And interestingly, Marx and Nietzsche are both 19th century.
And they're German.
And they're German. The Germans. Yeah.
It's
so that's a good
it's
one.
Interesting too that they're all men and they're all European. That's kind of our I mean, that's like just how philosophy is, I guess, or it was. So I guess it's not a lot to draw from. But I was thinking about that when we were trying to record, like, wonder why that is.
Well, I thought about doing something from Japan, like Shintoism or something, but kind of like the mental health aspect. I didn't want to step culturally on your toes. The belief in like spirits, spirits are ghosts, Halloween, and Shinto, everything is inhabited by these spirits. Oh gosh, I can't remember the word. Anyway, I did think about going, outside of the European tradition, but then I didn't want to step on any toes.
What about and I'm curious about this too, do you think American philosophy, like this transcendental philosophy that you like, it seems a little bit more happy? I don't know why.
Oh yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I don't want to be too corny here, but I think it's kind of like this American optimism.
Yeah.
And transcendentalism was all like, we're not Europe, we're something new. And so
I love that. That's amazing.
I love transcendentalism.
I wouldn't say I love it.
The American Scholar is a great man. Read the Americans. Everyone should read the American Scholar by Emerson. It's an essay, and it's just all about trying to establish American
identity,
writing and identity and intellectual, all of it. It was like, we are not Europe. Stop calling us that. We're something else. But anyway, it is a bit more positive. I do have to bring up probably one of my favorite quotes by Nietzsche. Taylor, which is very spooky. And that's, I'm paraphrasing because I never get quotes right. Careful not to stare too long into the abyss, or the abyss will stare back at you.
Yeah.
That's as creepy as a quote we'll get on this episode. That's a great one, man.
That's a good one. Thinking about eternal recurrence, which is not, it's not like a real thing I think he thinks about, but it's the idea that if you had to live one moment, like for infinity or forever, of your life, that's a metric to judge the quality of your life. I could be messing that up too. I'm not a big Nietzsche scholar or anything, but I think that's kind of spooky as well. That idea, it's kind of haunting.
Yeah.
I think it can be hopeful too, if you look at it that way, that you should live each day as if you may have to live this day forever. So you should make it the best that you possibly can, and you should be the best person that you can. But I agree that it can be haunting at the same time.
Yeah, and it makes you take into account like, oh, well, okay, so this terrible thing happened in my life. It was a choice, but my life, because of that terrible thing, ended up being like good.
That's true.
In the long run or whatever. And so like it makes you consider your entire life and will you put up with these pains in order for this greater gain, or try to avoid it maybe for something better. But you're right,
Mm-hmm.
Andrew. He didn't. It was more of a thought exercise for him, eternal recurrence, rather than like an actual doctrine or belief that he held about what happens to our souls after we die.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that a lot of Nietzsche's work can be read in a way that is both hopeful and haunting at the same time, depending on which perspective you bring to it. If you want to find it hopeful, you can, and you can read that in it. But if you want to find it haunting and scary, you can also do that. He kind of leaves that openness, I think, which also can be scary in itself. That he doesn't tell you what you should think. He just tells you what there is out there and tells you to think for yourself in some ways. There's definitely ideas that he holds that he's very passionate about.
What's one book that recommend for an intro to Nietzsche?
I would recommend Schopenhauer as Educator. That was one of the first things by Nietzsche that I read. It's primary source. That's where I have most experience from. But it's a short essay, not super long. You could read it within a few sittings. And it's pretty, I would say it's fairly accessible if you sit down and kind of go through it. And it's a bit more hopeful, easier to tackle, I would say.
For a secondary source, anything by Robert Solomon. I think he's passed away now, but he was a UT scholar, and he's the one who really kind of resurrected Nietzsche as far as like in the 70s and 80s, as far as like something that philosophy should take seriously. And so anything by him. There's also a good, what was it called? The Great Courses or whatever. You can get them on Audible. Yeah. There's like a multiple. Robert Solomon has an existentialism one on there, and talks a lot about Nietzsche on there as well.
And then there's a very short introduction to Nietzsche that's quite good, I think, as well.
That's right. You read that, didn't you, last summer? Or maybe this summer.
I don't know. Last summer, yeah. That one was pretty good.
He's complex.
Yeah. He's aphoristic, right?
A lot of his books is a lot, pages and pages of aphorisms.
And so I think he's more accessible. In my experience, he's been more accessible than someone like Spinoza or Kant or some Enlightenment pre-father. So that's good. That'll be helpful.
Yeah.
Well, just don't go out and pick up Ecce Homo or Thus Spoke Zarathustra. You got to know why he's writing each book and from what perspective he's writing it and why he's writing it. It's just not a book you pick up where he's going to talk about a theory.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Well, okay.
All right. Yeah, let's wrap it up. Thanks this was pretty fun. I'm kind of spooked out. I look a little down because I'm kind of freaked out and need to go.
Are you morose?
I don't know what that means. What does that mean?
It means you're down.
Oh.
It means you're bummed.
Well,
are you melancholic?
Yeah, I don't know how I'm going to sleep tonight.
Yeah.
This is freaky.
I love that word, melancholy. Anyway.
Sounds like a state of drunkenness or something. I don't know. Anyways, that was fun. Maybe we should do more holiday episodes.
Good times.
Yeah.
I'm just trying
Easter
to think
Bunny
of the
is next.
possibilities there, St. Patrick's Day.
Valentine's
Irish
Day.
philosophers or something.
Philosophers on Love.
Valentine's Day.
We could bring back love.
Absolutely.
That one would be really fun.
Yeah. And then we run through all the American holidays, we'd have to get international.
4th of July. We could do that. That would be a good one.
Oh, yeah. We could talk about the Declaration of
Bastille
Independence.
Day.
No.
Yeah. I'm sure there's a lot of French philosophy that we could pull up.
The British kind of celebrate 4th of July, Independence Day.
What?
Kind of ironically.
No, they do not.
Yeah, I was over there.
Really?
They do. I was over there on 4th of July one year, and like in Oxford, and they're like, "Hey, we're having a barbecue, down at the whatever square. Come join us. It's Independence Day," and it's kind of funny. They do funny. I remember someone told me they're like they take all these tea bags down to the Thames River there in Oxford at the bridge, and they dump the tea bags into the
Oh my
river.
gosh.
Yeah, it's good times. Anyway,
That
yes,
is so
we'll have to
funny.
do international holidays. Okay, we're officially wrapping this up, guys. All right, everyone, thanks for listening. We, of course, always love that you do. And if you want to contact us about anything, Taylor's going to tell you about that.
Yeah. If you liked this episode and you want us to do more episodes like this in the future, or you have any questions, email us either at contact@opendoorphilosophy.com or send us a DM on Instagram at opendoorphilosophy. And if you want to see the video version of this podcast and you're listening by audio, look on our YouTube channel.
That's great.
Yeah.
We're trying. Let us know if you like this new format
Yes.
online, because it's new. It's exciting.
Mhm.
Anyways, if you are interested in supporting us further, you can hit the like, subscribe, give us 5-star rating on Apple. We haven't said that in so long. Apple Podcasts, give us
Yeah.
a
We haven't
rating.
said that in like
Yeah.
years.
That's wild. So do that. Give us some feedback. And remember, if your life is in need of some philosophy, the door is always open. Thank you.
Bye.
See ya. Ooh.
Can you put some Scooby-Doo music in?
I'm gonna have all kinds of music in this one.